Welcome to the Module C overview of PAICE. Module C is exclusively about climate challenges. There are 7 different submodules to Module C. This is the introduction page here that shows us what we're trying to do, and that is to identify the main agroclimatic challenges and estimate the risk associated with each of those key challenges so that we can create a relative ranking of risk for those different challenges. When we talk about risk, what we're talking about there is vulnerability times occurrence times impact when occurrence happens. We set up Module C in the C- module. There are 3 key elements to C-, setting out up to 10 different climate challenges, both in terms of category and subcategory and detail. So we want to be quite specific here, not just a dry spell, but a dry spell in which part of the season. What we then do is set some thresholds for each of those. So we assign a unit, like millimeters at harvest or at planting, or percentage loss of output, or degree days above 35, so Tmax or Tmin, number of frost events, and we frame them out for 4 different types of years: mild, moderate, heavy, and catastrophic. Finally, we assign the different climate challenges to our different seasons. So in this data, we've got 3 different seasons. We can see that in the main, these climate challenges are assigned to a single season, but sometimes they can be assigned to both. Once we've set out those key challenges, what we need to look at is the vulnerability of different crops within the production domain. Now, where we know there's no relationship, say where we know that a particular climate event does not relate to a particular season, we will see that there is no relationship. But otherwise, we are filling in the area vulnerable for each crop against each climate hazard and the certainty that we have in the number that we're assigning. As always, we've got our data source down the bottom and any notes that help to explain the data that we're putting in. Once we know our vulnerability, we move to our occurrence. Here, what we want to know is, in the coming 10 years, how many times will we have mild, moderate, significant, and catastrophic years, as well as non-event years? We've got that set through our thresholds that we set in C-. So how many years do we not expect these climate hazards to occur? And then how many years would we expect mild, moderate, significant, and catastrophic years? As always, we've got our level of certainty, our data source, and our notes that help describe the data that we're putting in. So we said that our final calculation will be vulnerability times occurrence times impact. So the final input module there is our CI, I for impact. Here what we have is our list of crops along with our climate-induced events. So this has been filtered down only to crops that are vulnerable and only to when there is an occurrence of that event. We put in our tonnage to be expected in a non-event year, and then our tonnage in our mild, moderate, significant, and catastrophic years. As you'll see, we would expect that each time a little bit of yield will drop off. We also have our level of certainty, our notes, and our data sources. The idea here now is that we can calculate the actual impact across a production domain in these different types of years for our crops. And the importance of this is that we'll be able to do sensitivity analysis and say, well, what if a climate hazard is 10% worse than we actually expect it to be, or 10% less impactful, or occurring 10% less? So this really opens up opportunities to do a little bit more of scenario building around the climate challenges that face each production domain. From here, we go to our outputs page, and this is what it looks like. Of course, with the others as well, we press Control P, and the boundaries are set up to create a 4-page summary output for climate, where it says our crop and seasonal selections, our climate hazards, and the level of data certainty that we've entered. We then have our summary data of the different climate challenges that are likely to impact us, the production domain, in a disaggregated way. That means challenge by season, by crop. And then we have it aggregated just by challenge, by crop, and by challenge and season. We then have our straight list that tells us the economic loss expected and percentage loss in impacted area and production domain. Finally, we have some vulnerability data where we can say in this example data that rice in Rabi season is the most vulnerable to different climate hazards, as is the Rabi season compared to others. It's important to note, though, that these are additive and sometimes we have interactions between hazards. So this is really a nominal look at the different vulnerabilities that are within a production system, but they shouldn't be interpreted as fact and gospel because we need to do a deeper analysis of the interactions. For example, if you have a catastrophic flood year, you may not then necessarily have an impact from an additional storm that occurs because that yield has already been wiped out. We also, on the left-hand side, have the ability to filter in and out different things. So let us say that we were not interested in wheat anymore. We would put no on that. This will turn red and they will be removed from our results. So likewise, if we were not interested in sugarcane, for example, when we press no, all of our data adjusts. Likewise, if we knew that agronomy could do nothing for storm intensity, then we can filter that out and we can start to see results that might be relevant just to the agronomy that we are looking at. The other thing that we can do is we can adjust the currency if you've inputted in local currency, where you'll be able to look at it in US dollars or the local currency. We can change units between 1,000, million and billion, depending on the size of the production domain that you have. And we can also adjust how we're sorting this screen over here. So at the moment, it's being sorted by average, but we could sort by crop and season or otherwise. Of course, we've also got our notes if you're seeing things in there that think you need explaining or questions that are being raised, discussions that you're having within your workshop as well. We also have the ability to do a printout of every bit of pre-filled data. In this case, the production constraints module was skipped, so I'll just go to a different version of example data. Press Control P, and then we would print it as a PDF. But this sets out what is the system that we have framed for and the economically important crops. What are the production constraints? So we can see that we've got our definitions and then our summary data of the most important production constraints. We then have the same for our climate hazards. What were the definitions and what were the most important climate challenges? And finally, the uncertainties. So we can start to see what are the different uncertainties that we have within a system. This is example data, but we can see that overall we're not very certain around a lot of the data that we've put in, though it might change for different crops. Finally, what we have is our calculations page. So this is where we can see exactly how everything that we're seeing is calculated. So in this case, when we see C times Y, we go to those yellow boxes. So the crop area that's vulnerable is a multiplication of C, which is the number of hectares of that crop, times Y, the percentage area that is vulnerable. So each time, if there's a green box up here, it means it's your input. And then if it's a yellow box, it means it's a calculation, and it will tell you exactly how it's calculated all of these different numbers. So in summary, what we're doing in this C module is we're setting out what are the climate challenges. We're then looking at vulnerability, occurrence, and impact, putting that all together, and then creating a final list of the relative importance of different climate challenges.